in to what we're going to be learning this week. So this week's lesson is about comparing decimals. But of course, we have a prerequisite skill, which, just a reminder, is what we need to know in order to be successful in this lesson. And the best part, once again, is that these are skills that we have already covered this past year. So our prerequisite this week is that we would be able to compare fractions. Just like every week, they give us a really great example where they're comparing 9/10 and 5/10 in a few different models. So I want us to go ahead and start with number 1. Let's look at that one together because it might have been a while since we've compared fractions on a number line. And that's what it's asking us to do. So when I go and I'm going to go compare two fractions on a number line, first I'm going to look and see what those fractions are. And it says that I'm going to label 2/10 and 6/10 on the number line below and write a symbol to compare the two fractions. So that would be over here. So let me just make sure that this number line, I notice that my denominator is tenths. So that means I'm going to have to partition my number line into tenths. I'm going to double check to make sure that this number line they've given me is in tenths. So if you would like to count with me, let's do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this number line is partitioned into tenths. Now, what I would say is that you should pause the video right here and go ahead and number this number line 1/10, 2/10, all the way to 1, which would be 10/10. Now, for time's sake, I'm not going to number my entire number line, but I still think you should pause and do it. So let's go ahead and think. I want you to pause the video now and put where 2/10 and 6/10 is. So you might circle them so you can really see where each of them are. So while you are pausing the video, I'm going to go ahead and do this. I see that that is 2/10. And then I see, okay, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, and I see that this is 6/10. Okay, so now when I look at the number line and I see 0 and then I see 1 and I'm going to compare these two fractions, I need to look and I need to see, which one is greater? Or 2/10, we could see which one is greater or which one is less. And so let me see. Well, 2/10 is closer to 0, so that means that 2/10 is what? Less than 6/10. So I would do the less than symbol. 2/10 is less than 6/10, or 6/10 is greater than 2/10. So what I want you to do now is you should pause the video. Now, I'm not going to do this one with you, but I think it is a very, very important one for you to do right now, is to look at problem 1. This is what number 2 says, and explain how to use the fraction 1/2 as a benchmark. Remember that word benchmark, to compare 2/10 and 6/10. So go ahead and write your explanation. And once you've done it, unpause me so we can go ahead and continue with our lesson. So that was on page 229, and that was just getting us warmed up to compare fractions on a number line. Another way you can compare fractions is with a model. So if you have your packet, I want you to go to page 230, and we're going to look right here at number 4. And let's go ahead and read number 4 together, which says that we are going to shade and label the models below to show 3/10 and 3/100. Then we'll write a symbol to compare the fractions. So, scholars, I'm thinking in my mind, which model am I going to use for each fraction? Well, right here, I can see that this is partitioned into 10. So that means I'm going to shade in my 3/10 model on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and write that just so that way there's no, confusion about where I'm going to label and shade. So there's 3/10. And then I see that this one's partitioned into hundredths. So then I'm going to go ahead and just label this real quick so that way I can make sure I do it correctly. Okay, so now scholars, if I'm going to shade in 3/10, how many of these partitions am I going to shade in? Hopefully you said 3. So let's go ahead and do that. Now for time's sake, I'm just kind of doing a messy shade in. So there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. Okay, now how about for 300ths? How many am I shading in? Hopefully you said 300ths. So there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. So there's 300ths. Now when I look at these two models and I compare, what do I visually see? I want you to answer that in your head. What do I visually see when I look at these two models? Now, hopefully you said something like, when I look at these two models, I see that 3/10 is greater than 300ths. So with that, I would put the greater than symbol in the box right there. I would put the greater than symbol in the box right there. So now that we've covered that prerequisite skill of comparing 3/10 and 300ths and with a model, we're going to go ahead and get into the actual lesson, which is on page 231, which we are going to compare hundredths decimals. Now, I want us to look at number 3, because it's asking us to use a place value chart to show 33 and 35 hundredths. That's first. And I want us to remind us of how we place these numbers in the place value chart. Well, first I see that this in my ones place I have 0 for 33 hundredths. So I'm going to place a 0 in my ones. I see that there's 3/10 and then 3 hundredths. And then I would repeat that same process for 35 hundredths. So here we go. 0 ones, 3/10, and 5 hundredths. Sorry, that's kind of a weird looking 3. There we go. Make it better. So 3/10 and 5 hundredths. So now when I go, it says it wants us to explain how the place value chart shows which decimal is less. Now, if you remember from class, what we're going to do is we are going to go place value by place value to compare our decimal. So let's go ahead and do that. Are my ones the same? Yep. Are my tenths the same? What's your answer? Hopefully it's yes. Now, when I get to my hundredths, are my hundredths the same? Tell me this. Are my hundredths the same? No, they aren't. My hundredths are not the same. So that means I'm going to have to compare, and I'm going to see that 5 hundredths is greater than 3 hundredths, which means that 35 hundredths is greater than 33 hundredths. Now, if we were to explain that in a sentence, I would want you to use a sentence stem Let's use a sentence stem to help us out here. Let me move this text box right here. So the sentence stem I'd like you to use would be, the place value chart shows in the hundredths place, and then I want you to fill in the rest on your own. So you'll go ahead and do that. But I want us to remind us of a strategy when we're looking at numbers that have tenths and hundredths, that we can remember and think of money. Okay, so if I'm sometimes struggling and I'm like, you know what though, I just can't see the difference between 33 hundredths and 35 hundredths. I'm gonna think in my head, 33 hundredths, 33 cents. And then I can also think of 35 hundredths, 35 cents. Now, if I wanted to get something that was 50 cents, would I be closer to 50 cents with 33 cents or 35 cents? And hopefully your answer would be 35 cents. So just remember the money strategy as a great way to help you compare decimals. Now let's go ahead and do one more example together before we go. The last example I want us to do is right here on page 233. So go ahead and look at page 233. And I want us to look at this is kind of a word problem that's going to ask us to shade some models, and then there's going to be some following questions. So it says right here, let's read it together. Lucas bought 6/10 pound of a fish and 85 hundredths pound of shrimp to make a stew. Shade the models below to compare 6/10 and 85 hundredths. So I'm looking, and this is my tenths model, and this is my hundredths model. So I'm just going to write right here that I know that I'm going to draw or shade in my 6/10 here, and then my 85 hundredths here. So let's go ahead and look. So if I'm going to shade in 6/10 scholars, how many of these partitions am I going to shade in? Hopefully your answer was 6. So again, for time's sake, I'm just doing these really quickly, but you always want to do them as neat as you can so nothing gets mistaken for something else. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that shows 6/10. Now let's look at this. 85 hundredths, 85 hundredths. Let's see. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Because I'm looking at this and that tells me 8/10, and I know that I would shade in then 8 of these. Okay, so I'm just going to do a really quick shade in to show that that's going to be 8. And then if I need to show 85, it means that I also need to show, how many more do I need to shade in? Hopefully you said 5. So then we're going to do 1, 2, 3, come on, 4, okay, and then one more, 5. Okay, now when I look at this model, and I know that this whole model equals 1, I'm looking at it and I see that, wow, even though the shade-in job right here is a little bit crazy, I can definitely see that 85 hundredths is closer to one whole, to shading in the whole model, than this 6/10 is, which tells me that 6/10 is less than 85 hundredths, or that 85 hundredths is greater than 6/10. So now what I want you to do is pause the video and answer this question. Did Lucas buy more fish or more shrimp? Use equivalent fractions to explain your answer. So go ahead and pause the video and do that. And now hopefully you're joining me back from answering number 3. Before we go, I want to let you know of a few problems that I'd really like for you to try to grow and expand your thinking. So one is that I would like you to go back to page 232, and number 6 is really going to be good for you. It's just a bunch of comparisons between tenths and hundredths, and it's really going to help you grow your knowledge and your reasoning when comparing decimals. But of course, you'll do the whole packet too. Then on page 235, number 3 is going to be a challenge problem, but I really think it's going to expand your knowledge with comparing decimals.